23 years passed after the Exile vote. To the rest of the galaxy, humanity simply disappeared. The communication networks that once carried human broadcasts went silent. The trade routes that human ships had traveled became empty. The outer colonies were abandoned, their populations moving back to Earth and Mars, and the stations orbiting the moon. From the outside, it looked like humanity had given up. It looked like the young species had crawled back to their home planet to die slowly in isolation. The Confederacy of Allied Species congratulated itself on solving the human problem. Official reports declared that the aggressive young species had finally learned its place. Experts predicted that humanity would collapse within a century. Without access to galactic technology and trade, they said, the primitive humans could not survive. The experts were completely wrong. Behind the silence, behind the closed borders and empty shipping lanes, something was happening. Humanity was not dying. Humanity was evolving. Humanity was preparing for war. Admiral Samantha Cole stood on the observation deck of Forge 7, one of the massive orbital shipyards that floated in secret around Mars. She was 52 years old, with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too much death. She had lost her entire family to the Crimson Plague when she was just a young officer. She had watched her 2 daughters die because the aliens refused to share their medicine. She had never forgotten. She would never forgive. Through the thick glass window, she could see the latest warship taking shape in the construction cradle. It was the 47th vessel of the Vengeance class, a long and sleek predator designed for one purpose only: killing aliens. Commander Kevin Marsh walked up beside her. He was her chief of operations, a quiet man who had lost his parents in the Vecna raids. Like almost everyone in the military, he had personal reasons to hate the galaxy. Production is ahead of schedule, Kevin reported. We will have the full fleet ready within 16 months. How many ships total? 512 warships of various classes, plus over 3,000 fighter craft and support vessels. Samantha nodded slowly. And the new weapon systems? The particle beam cannons are performing beyond expectations. In testing, they cut through Confederacy-grade shields in less than 2 seconds. The aliens have never seen anything like them. They still think we are using the same technology we had 23 years ago. Kevin allowed himself a small smile. That is exactly what we want them to think. The truth was that human technology had advanced more in the past 2 decades than it had in the previous century. When the Confederacy had exiled humanity, they had accidentally freed them from all restrictions. The treaties that had limited human weapons development were gone. The rules that had prevented certain types of research no longer applied. Humanity could build whatever they wanted, and no one was watching. They had started by studying every piece of alien technology they could find: old trade goods, captured equipment from the Vecna raiders, stolen data from Confederacy networks. Human scientists had taken apart every device, learned how it worked, and then found ways to make it better. The results were incredible. Human ships were now faster than anything in the Confederacy fleet. Human weapons were more powerful. Human shields were stronger. In just 23 years, humanity had gone from being one of the weakest species in the galaxy to potentially the most dangerous. Samantha turned away from the window. What about the ground forces? General Patricia Rivera reports that training is complete. We have 4 million combat-ready soldiers and another 8 million in reserve. The powered armor is fully operational. Show me. Kevin led her to a large hangar bay where rows of armored suits stood waiting. Each suit was 3 meters tall, covered in thick plates of advanced alloy, and equipped with enough weapons to destroy a small building. A soldier wearing one of these suits could fight for days without rest, survive direct hits from heavy weapons, and move faster than any unarmored fighter. A young soldier named Lisa Chun was running tests on one of the suits. She snapped to attention when she saw the Admiral. "At ease, soldier," Samantha said. "How does it feel?" Lisa relaxed slightly. "Like being a giant, ma'am. The neural link connects directly to my brain. The suit moves exactly the way I want it to move. It feels like the armor is part of my own body." "Good. You will need that connection when the time comes." Samantha walked along the rows of armor, examining each suit carefully. 23 years of work had led to this moment. 23 years of pain and sacrifice and secret preparation. Every human who had died from the plague, every colony that had been destroyed by raiders, every insult and rejection from the galaxy had fueled this effort. She remembered the day the Exile vote had passed. She remembered watching the broadcast with her fellow officers, seeing the aliens celebrate as humanity was thrown away like garbage. She remembered the cold rage that had filled her heart. That rage had never faded. It had only grown stronger. Kevin caught up with her. "Admiral, we have received new intelligence reports. The Mordai are preparing an invasion fleet." Samantha stopped walking. "Tell me more." "They have gathered 173 warships near the border of human space. Their Supreme Commander believes that humanity is weak and isolated. He thinks we will be easy to conquer." "When do they plan to attack?" "Within the next 2 months. They intend to enslave our population and claim our solar system's resources." Samantha smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Then they will be the first to learn the truth about what humanity has become. Should we inform the civilian government?" "The civilian government already knows. President Martinez has given us full authority to respond as we see fit." Samantha began walking toward the command center. "For 23 years, we have been silent. We have hidden in our solar system, letting the galaxy believe we were dying. We have let them forget about us." She stopped at a large holographic display that showed the full scope of human military power. Hundreds of warships, thousands of smaller craft, millions of soldiers ready for battle. Weapons that the galaxy had never imagined. "The Mordai think they are coming to conquer a weak and helpless species," Samantha said. "They think this will be an easy victory. They have no idea what is waiting for them." Kevin studied the display. "After we defeat the Mordai, what then?" "Then we move on to the others. The Threxan, who let our children die. The species that voted for exile. The High Arbiter and his assembly. One by one, we will visit them all. One by one, we will make them pay for what they did. Some might say that is too harsh. Some might argue for peace and reconciliation." Samantha turned to face him, her eyes hard as stone. 16 million children died from the Crimson Plague because the Threxan wanted to enslave us instead of sharing their medicine. 4 million colonists were slaughtered by raiders while the Confederacy refused to help. They showed us no mercy when we were weak. We will show them no mercy now that we are strong. She looked back at the display, at the fleet that represented 2 decades of hidden work. They created this. They could have welcomed us as friends. They could have helped us grow and learn. Instead, they chose to exploit us, abandon us, and exile us. Now they will face the consequences of that choice. Kevin nodded slowly. "When do we begin?" "As soon as the Mordai arrive. Let them come. Let them believe they are the predators and we are the prey. And when they enter our space, we will show them just how wrong they are." The lights of the shipyard reflected in Samantha's eyes as she watched another warship take shape in the construction cradle. The time for hiding was almost over. The time for vengeance was about to begin. The great chamber was filled with silence. Over 400 alien species had gathered in the Galactic Assembly Station, and every single one of them was watching the giant crystal screen at the center of the room. The numbers appeared slowly, one by one. 412 votes in favor. 17 votes to abstain. Only 3 votes against. The vote to exile humanity from the Confederacy of Allied Species had passed. Ambassador Daniel Hayes stood at the human delegation podium. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had spent 15 years trying to build bridges between Earth and the alien civilizations of the galaxy. Now, in a single moment, all of that work had been destroyed. His aide, a young woman named Nicole Parker, stood beside him. Her hands were shaking as she held her electronic tablet. She had believed in this mission. She had believed that the galaxy would accept humanity as equals. She had been wrong. The High Arbiter of the Assembly, a tall insect-like creature named Zorkith, rose from his seat. His body was covered in hard black shell, and his mouth was filled with sharp mandibles that clicked together when he spoke. "The motion has passed," Zorkith announced. His voice echoed through the massive chamber. "From this moment forward, the species known as humanity is expelled from the Confederacy of Allied Species. All trade agreements are cancelled. All technology exchanges are stopped. All human colonies outside the Sol system must be abandoned. Earth and its nearby planets are now forbidden zones. No Confederacy ship may enter human space. No human ship may enter Confederacy space." The alien delegates began to make sounds of approval. Some of them clicked their claws together. Others flashed bright colors across their skin. A few made deep humming noises that vibrated through the floor. They were celebrating. They were happy that humanity was being thrown out. Daniel watched them celebrate. He felt cold inside. Not angry. Not sad. Just cold and empty. He remembered the day, 43 years ago, when humanity had first made contact with alien life. The whole world had celebrated. People had danced in the streets. They had believed that a new age of wonder and discovery had begun. They had believed that the universe was filled with friends, waiting to meet them. They had been so naive. The truth was much darker. The galaxy was filled with ancient civilizations that had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. They looked at humanity the way a person might look at an insect. Humans were young. Humans were primitive. Humans were not worthy of respect. For 4 decades, humanity had tried to prove itself. They had followed every rule. They had signed every treaty. They had accepted every unfair trade deal. They had smiled and nodded and begged for scraps of technology that other species threw away like garbage. And what had they received in return? Contempt, exploitation, and now exile. Daniel stepped forward to the speaking platform. The celebrating aliens fell silent. They wanted to hear the defeated species beg for mercy. They wanted to enjoy the final humiliation. "You believe you have judged us fairly," Daniel said. His voice was calm and steady. "You say that we are too aggressive. You say that we are too dangerous. You say that we cannot be trusted to live among civilized species. You have decided that isolation is the right punishment for a young species that has only been traveling among the stars for 43 years. He paused and looked around the chamber. Thousands of alien eyes stared back at him. "Very well. We accept your judgment. But I want all of you to remember this moment. I want you to remember what you have done here today." Zorkith made a sound that might have been laughter. "Is that a threat, Ambassador? Your species has no fleet. You have no advanced weapons. What exactly do you think you can do to us?" Daniel ignored the interruption. "I want you to remember that when the Vecna Raiders attacked our outer colonies, we came to this assembly and begged for help. 2 million of our people were being slaughtered. We asked for military support. We asked for defensive technology. We asked for anything that could save innocent lives." His voice grew harder. "And you refused. You told us that the Vecna attacks were an internal human matter. You told us to solve our own problems." The chamber was completely silent now. Some of the delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "I want you to remember that when the Crimson Plague spread through our population, we came to this assembly again. The disease was killing millions of our children. The medicine to cure it existed. The Threxan had developed it centuries ago. We asked for help. We offered to pay any price. Daniel pointed at the Threxan delegation, a group of tall reptilian creatures with cold yellow eyes. And you demanded payment that you knew we could not afford. You wanted us to give you 3 of our colony planets. You wanted us to become your servants. When we refused, you let our children die. The Threxan ambassador hissed angrily, but said nothing. 16 million humans died from the Crimson Plague. Daniel continued. 16 million. Most of them were children under the age of 10. And when we finally developed our own cure, using technology we had to steal because you would not share it, you called us criminals. He stepped back from the platform. You have voted to exile us. You have declared us dangerous and aggressive. But let me tell you something that every species in this chamber should understand. Daniel walked toward the exit, with Nicole following close behind him. At the doorway, he stopped and turned back to face the assembly one final time. We came to the stars with open hands. We came looking for friends and allies. We came with hope in our hearts. And you answered our hope with cruelty. You showed us that the galaxy has no place for kindness. You taught us that only power matters. His eyes swept across the chamber, meeting the gaze of every species that had voted against humanity. We will not forget this lesson. And someday, when you need help, when you face a threat that you cannot handle alone, you will remember this moment. You will remember the day you threw humanity away. And you will understand that we learned exactly what you taught us. He turned and walked out of the chamber. The doors closed behind him with a soft sound. Nicole waited until they were in the shuttle before she spoke. What happens now, sir? Daniel stared out the window at the assembly station, watching it grow smaller as they flew away. Now we go home. We close our borders. And we begin to prepare. Prepare for what? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was like ice. For the day when we return. And when that day comes, Nicole, we will show them exactly what they created. We will show them no mercy, just like they showed us. The shuttle turned toward Earth, carrying the last human diplomats away from the confederacy of allied species. Behind them, the alien delegates continued their celebration, completely unaware that they had just made the worst mistake in galactic history. The Mordai invasion fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of human territory. 173 warships hung in the darkness of space, their weapons powered and ready. Supreme Commander Velkath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crimson Fang, and surveyed the stars with satisfaction. The Mordai were a warrior species. They had conquered dozens of worlds over the centuries, enslaving weaker species and taking their resources. They were feared throughout the galaxy for their brutality and their skill in combat. And now they had come for humanity. What do our sensors show? Velkath demanded. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. His tactical officer, a younger Mordai whose scales were still bright with youth, consulted his instruments. We are detecting a small number of human vessels in orbit around their third planet. No more than 20 ships. They appear to be older models, probably from before the exile. Velkath made a sound of contempt. As I expected, the humans have been isolated for over 2 decades. They have no trade, no technology exchange, no contact with advanced civilizations. They have regressed to primitive status. Should we attempt to communicate with them first, Supreme Commander? Perhaps offer them a chance to surrender? Why waste time with such things? The humans are a defeated species. The galaxy has abandoned them. We will destroy their pathetic fleet, occupy their planets, and claim their population as slaves. The strong do not negotiate with the weak. The invasion fleet moved forward in standard attack formation. The Mordai ships were massive and ugly, covered in weapons and armor plating. They had crushed enemy fleets many times before. This would be no different. Velkath watched the small cluster of human ships on his display. They were not even trying to flee. They were just sitting there, waiting. Perhaps they had already accepted their fate. Perhaps they knew that resistance was useless. Then the human ships began to move. At first, Velkath thought his sensors were malfunctioning. The human vessels accelerated at speeds that should have been impossible. They split into groups and executed maneuvers that defied the laws of physics as he understood them. Within seconds, they had spread out into a complex pattern surrounding the Mordai fleet. What is happening? Velkath demanded. What kind of engines are those ships using? Before anyone could answer, the human ships opened fire. Velkath had never seen weapons like these. Beams of blinding white light cut through Mordai's shields as if they did not exist. Projectiles moving at incredible speeds punched through armor plating like it was made of paper. Explosions blossomed across the formation as ship after ship was destroyed. The bridge of the Crimson Fang shook violently as a nearby vessel exploded. "Return fire!" Velkath screamed. All ships attacked the humans. The Mordai weapons lashed out, filling space with deadly energy. But the human ships danced through the barrage with impossible speed. They twisted and turned, avoiding shots that should have hit them. Their own shields absorbed the few hits that landed, glowing briefly before returning to normal. And they kept firing. They kept destroying. They kept killing. "Supreme Commander, we have lost 47 ships. The tactical officer shouted. "Impossible! The battle has only lasted 30 seconds. But the tactical display told the truth. More than a quarter of the invasion fleet was already gone, reduced to expanding clouds of hot gas and tumbling debris. The human ships, those 20 small vessels that Velkath had dismissed as worthless, were tearing his forces apart. How was this possible? The humans were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to be primitive. They were supposed to be easy prey. Another explosion rocked the Crimson Fang as a beam of white light sliced across its hull. Warning alarms screamed throughout the ship. Hull breach on decks 7 through 12. We are losing atmosphere. Supreme Commander, more human ships are appearing. Velkath stared at his display in horror. New contacts were emerging from hiding spots throughout the solar system. They had been running dark, invisible to sensors, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Carriers launched thousands of small fighter craft that swarmed toward the Mordai. Fleet like angry insects, the trap had been sprung. And the Mordai were the prey. "All ships, emergency hyperspace jump," Velkath commanded. "Retreat to Mordai space immediately." The surviving ships began to power up their jump drives, but escape was not so simple. The human fighters were too fast, too agile. They hunted down fleeing vessels and destroyed them before they could complete their jumps. The larger human warships moved to cut off retreat routes, their terrible weapons blazing. On the bridge of the human flagship, Admiral Samantha Cole watched the battle with cold satisfaction. Commander Kevin Marsh stood beside her, reading reports from the various battle groups. "Enemy losses are at 60% and climbing," Kevin reported. "They are trying to retreat, but our fighters are preventing most of them from jumping. Good, let a few escape. I want survivors to carry the message back to Mordai space." "Message, Admiral?" Samantha's eyes never left the display. "I want them to tell their leaders what happened here. I want them to describe what human weapons can do. I want them to spread fear through every species in the Confederacy." Another cluster of Mordai ships vanished in a series of explosions. The invasion fleet that had arrived with such confidence was being annihilated. Kevin checked his instruments. "The enemy flagship, the Crimson Fang, is trying to escape. Track it, but do not destroy it yet." I want to speak with their commander. A communication channel was opened. Supreme Commander Velkath appeared on the screen, his face twisted with rage and fear. Behind him, his bridge was filled with smoke and sparking equipment. "Human," Velkath snarled. "What treachery is this? The Confederacy reports said you were weak. They said you had no advanced technology." "The Confederacy was wrong," Samantha replied calmly. "They saw what we wanted them to see. They believed what they wanted to believe. This is impossible. No species could develop such weapons in only 2 decades. Humanity is not like other species. When you push us, we push back. When you hurt us, we grow stronger. When you try to destroy us, we become something far more dangerous than you ever imagined." Velkath's ship shook as another hit struck its hull. "What do you want? Name your terms." "We can negotiate." "Negotiate?" Samantha laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Your fleet came to enslave my people. You came to conquer our worlds and steal our resources. You came to do to us what you have done to dozens of other species." She leaned forward, her eyes burning with 23 years of cold fury. "There will be no negotiation. There will be no mercy. You will return to your people and tell them what happened here. You will tell them that humanity is no longer weak. You will tell them that we remember every wrong that was done to us. And you will tell them that we are coming." She cut the communication. "Let the flagship go. Destroy everything else." The final phase of the battle lasted only minutes. When it was over, only 17 Mordai ships remained, fleeing into hyperspace with their drives pushed to maximum. 156 vessels have been destroyed. Over 80,000 Mordai warriors were dead. The human fleet had not lost a single ship. Kevin looked at the aftermath, displayed on the tactical screen. Debris fields stretched across millions of kilometers of space. Escape pods drifted among the wreckage, filled with survivors who would be collected and imprisoned. "Admiral, what happens now?" Samantha turned away from the display. "Now we prepare for the next phase. The Mordai were just the beginning. There are many other species that need to be reminded that humanity exists. The Confederacy will respond. They will try to organize against us. Let them try. By the time they understand what is happening, it will already be too late." Samantha walked toward the exit. "Send a message to Earth. Tell President Martinez that Phase 1 is complete. Tell him that the galaxy is about to learn what happens when you exile humanity." She paused at the doorway and looked back at the debris field one last time. "They thought isolation would break us. They thought we would fade away and die. Instead, they gave us 23 years to build an army. They gave us every reason to hate them. And now they will face the consequences." The human fleet began to move, gathering itself for the journey ahead. The war had begun, and humanity would show no mercy. News of the Mordai defeat spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Every species heard the reports. Every government received the intelligence. The impossible had happened. The primitive humans, isolated and forgotten for 2 decades, had destroyed one of the most feared fleets in known space. In the great chamber of the Galactic Assembly, panic was growing. High Arbiter Zorkith called the emergency session to order, but his voice could barely be heard over the chaos. Ambassadors from hundreds of species were shouting at each other, their translators struggling to keep up with the flood of angry words. "How did this happen?" screamed the Mordai representative. "Our fleet was destroyed in less than 1 hour. The humans had weapons we have never seen before." The intelligence reports were clear. Another ambassador protested. Human technology was primitive. They had no advanced weapons. They were supposed to be dying. Obviously, the reports were wrong. Zorkith slammed his ceremonial staff against the floor. The sound echoed through the chamber, and slowly the delegates fell silent. We must assess this situation calmly, Zorkith said. His voice was old now, weaker than it had been 23 years ago when he had announced humanity's exile. The humans have defeated a single invasion force. This does not mean they pose a threat to the Confederacy as a whole. A single invasion force? The Threxan ambassador rose to his feet. His yellow eyes were wide with fear. 173 ships. The Mardai had one of the strongest fleets in the galaxy, and the humans crushed them in minutes. How many ships do the humans have? Where did they get their technology? We do not know, Zorkith admitted. Our intelligence gathering on humanity has been limited since the exile. Perhaps we should open diplomatic channels, suggested the ambassador from the Velnari, one of the 3 species that had voted against exile. We wronged the humans. Perhaps if we admitted our mistake and offered to restore their place in the Confederacy, they would stand down. Harsh laughter filled the chamber. Stand down? Why would they stand down? We threw them out of the galactic community. We let their children die from plague. We allowed raiders to attack their colonies. We gave them every reason to hate us, and now they have the power to act on that hatred. An aide rushed onto the floor and handed a data tablet to Zorkith. The High Arbiter read the contents, and the color drained from his face. I have just received new information, Zorkith announced. His voice was shaking. The human fleet has left their solar system. Intelligence estimates indicate they have over 500 warships, with more being built every day. The chamber erupted in screams. 3 weeks later, the human fleet arrived at the Threxan homeworld. Ambassador Lavra Quinn stood on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel that accompanied the warships. She was 51 years old, with steel gray hair and a face that rarely smiled. Her father had died from the Crimson Plague when she was a child. She remembered begging him not to leave, not understanding why the doctors could not save him. She had spent her entire life preparing for this moment. The Threxan fleet moved to intercept, but they stopped when they saw the size of the human force. 300 warships, each one carrying weapons that had destroyed the Mordai. The Threxan commanders understood immediately that they had no chance in a direct fight. Lavra opened a communication channel to the Threxan government. 23 years ago, the Threxan led the effort to exile humanity from the Confederacy, she said. You accused us of being dangerous. You called us savages. You convinced the other species that we could not be trusted. She paused, letting her words sink in. But that was not your greatest crime. Your greatest crime was what happened during the Crimson Plague. 16 million of our people were dying. Most of them were children. The medicine to save them existed. Your scientists had developed the cure centuries ago. It would have cost you nothing to share it with us. The Threxan Prime Minister appeared on the screen. His scales were pale with fear. Ambassador, please. That was a decision made by the previous government. Many of us disagreed with that policy, but you did not stop it. You watched our children die, and you did nothing. Laura's voice was cold as ice. You demanded that we surrender 3 of our colony worlds and become your servants. You tried to use our suffering as a tool to enslave us. We can negotiate. We can offer reparations. We can provide technology, resources, whatever you want. It is too late for negotiation. Humanity has only 2 offers for the Threxan people. Laura held up one finger. First option, you surrender unconditionally. Your military forces will be dismantled. Your government will accept human oversight. You will pay reparations for the 16 million lives that were lost because of your greed. This process will take many years, but eventually, you will be allowed to govern yourselves again. She held up a second finger. Second option, you refuse to surrender. In that case, we will demonstrate the same mercy that you showed our dying children. The Prime Minister's mouth opened and closed several times. He looked at his advisors. but they had no answers. He looked at the tactical display showing the human fleet surrounding his world. There was no escape. How long do we have to decide? 1 hour? The Threxan government debated for 43 minutes. Then they surrendered. Admiral Samantha Cole personally oversaw the dismantling of the Threxan fleet. One by one, the proud warships were reduced to scrap metal. The military commanders were forced to watch as their vessels were destroyed. General Patricia Rivera led the ground forces that occupied key Threxan cities. There was no fighting. The Threxan population understood that resistance would only bring more suffering. They watched in silence as human soldiers marched through their streets, as human flags were raised over their government buildings. The reparations were calculated precisely. Every human life lost to the Crimson Plague was valued. Every child who had died in agony was counted. The total amount was enormous, enough to cripple the Threxan economy for generations. Kevin Marsh stood beside Samantha as they watched the final Threxan battleship being cut apart. "Is this right?" he asked quietly. "Some might say we are going too far." "Too far?" Samantha turned to face him. "They let our children die. They could have saved them with medicine that cost them nothing. Instead, they tried to use our suffering to make us their slaves. How far is too far, Kevin? How much mercy should we show to those who showed us none?" Kevin was silent for a moment. "I understand, Admiral. I lost family to the plague too. I know the hatred that comes from that loss. But I worry that we are becoming the very thing they accused us of being. They accused us of being dangerous. They accused us of being aggressive. They were wrong then, but they were right about the future they created." Samantha looked out at the ruined fleet. "When you treat a species as your enemy long enough, eventually they become your enemy. When you refuse to show mercy, you teach them that mercy is weakness. This is what they taught us. This is who we have become." She began walking toward the command center. "Send a message to the other species that voted for exile. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that we are coming for each of them in turn. Give them time to prepare their surrenders. And if they refuse to surrender?" Samantha stopped but did not turn around. "Then they will face the same choice the Threxan faced. Submission or destruction. We will not negotiate. We will not compromise. We will not show mercy." She continued walking. The galaxy made its decision 23 years ago. Now they will live with the consequences. Across the Confederacy, species that had voted for exile began to panic. Some tried to organize military resistance. Others attempted to flee to the far edges of known space. A few sent desperate messages to humanity, begging for forgiveness that none of it mattered. The human fleet was already moving to its next target, and nothing in the galaxy could stop them. The Galactic Assembly Station had never been designed as a fortress. It was built to be a symbol of peace and cooperation, a place where hundreds of species could gather to discuss their differences and work toward common goals. But in the weeks following the fall of the Threxan, desperate efforts were made to turn it into something that could withstand an attack. Defense platforms were constructed around the station. Confederacy fleets from a dozen species gathered to protect what remained of galactic civilization. The best military minds in the known universe worked together to create a defensive strategy. It was not enough that the human fleet emerged from fold space in a perfect sphere formation around the assembly station. 400 warships appeared simultaneously, surrounding the gathered defenders in every direction. Within seconds, the defense platforms were disabled by precise strikes that destroyed their power systems without killing their crews. The Confederacy fleet found itself trapped. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded. Their weapons could not penetrate human shields. Their engines could not outrun human ships. They had no chance at all. Admiral Samantha Cole's transmission played on every screen in the station and on every ship in the Confederacy fleet. 23 years ago, I was a junior officer in the human delegation. I stood in the gallery and watched as you voted to exile my species. I watched as you celebrated our punishment. I watched as Ambassador Daniel Hayes warned you that you would remember this moment. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with cold fire. I remember. Every human remembers. And now we have returned. I, Arbiter Zorkith, his body bent with age and trembling with fear, stepped forward to respond. His voice was carried to the human fleet through the communication system. Admiral Cole, please. We can negotiate. The Confederacy acknowledges that mistakes were made. We can discuss reparations, restoration of trade agreements, full readmission to the galactic community. We can give you anything you want. You misunderstand our purpose, High Arbiter. We have not come to rejoin your community. We have come to end it. Panic spread through the station. Delegates ran for escape pods, only to find them disabled. The Confederacy fleet attempted to engage, but human weapons reduced their ships to debris within minutes. It was not a battle. It was an execution. You called us dangerous, Cole continued. You called us aggressive. You feared what we might become if given access to galactic technology and resources. And now you discover that your fears were correct, but for the wrong reasons. She leaned forward in her command chair. We were never a threat to you. We only wanted to explore, to trade, to learn. We came to the stars with hope in our hearts. We extended our hands in friendship, and you responded with contempt. We begged for help when our people were dying, and you demanded payment we could not afford. We defended ourselves against raiders, and you called us savages. You created the enemy you feared. You pushed us until we had no choice but to push back. And now that enemy is here, and you have no one to blame but yourselves. The operation that followed was surgical and without mercy. The Confederacy's governing structure was taken apart piece by piece. Military forces were destroyed or forced to surrender. Political leaders were arrested and put on trial for their roles in the exile and its consequences. Humanity did not seek to conquer or enslave. That would have made them no different from the Mordai or the old Confederacy powers. Instead, they created what they called the New Order. Every species that had voted for exile was required to pay reparations for the suffering they had caused. Their military forces were reduced to defensive levels only. Their governments were reformed under human supervision. Trade agreements were rewritten on human terms. The 3 species that had voted against exile were rewarded. The Volnari, the Korthan, and the Jilari received preferential treatment. New technology, favorable trade deals, and protected status that exempted them from the harsher rules imposed on others. The assembly itself was dissolved. In its place, a new council was created where humanity held permanent veto power. No decision affecting the galaxy could be made without human approval. Daniel Hayes, now 74 years old, but still sharp and strong, returned to the place where he had once stood as a defeated ambassador. The old assembly chamber had been converted into a memorial, its walls covered with the names of every human who had died as a result of exile. Nicole Parker stood beside him. Her hair was gray now, and lines marked her face, but her eyes were still fierce. 23 years of silence, Daniel said quietly. 23 years of building, preparing, waiting. Was it worth it? Nicole looked at the names carved into the walls. 16 million dead from the Crimson Plague. 4 million killed in the colony raids. 20 years of isolation and suffering. This was never about revenge, Daniel. It was about justice. Some would say there is little difference. Perhaps, but we gave them every chance. We came to them peacefully. We asked for help. We begged for mercy. They refused. Nicole touched the wall, her fingers tracing the carved letters. They taught us that mercy was weakness. They taught us that only power mattered. We simply learned the lesson they forced upon us. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. I used to dream of a galaxy where humans and aliens worked together as partners. I believed we could build something beautiful among the stars. That dream died 23 years ago in this chamber. They killed it when they cast their votes. Nicole turned to face him. But perhaps something new can grow in its place. The new order is not built on friendship, but it is built on respect. The galaxy respects human power now. Maybe someday that respect can become something more. Maybe, Daniel agreed. But that is a problem for the next generation. 50 years after the Exile vote, the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. The old Confederacy was a memory, replaced by a new order with humanity at its center. Trade flowed freely, but on human terms. Technology advanced rapidly, but under human oversight. Peace prevailed across known space, but it was enforced by human power. Admiral Samantha Cole had retired long ago. She lived quietly on Earth, in a small house with a garden where she grew flowers and vegetables. Her grandchildren visited her often, full of questions about the war and the great changes that had reshaped the galaxy. "Grandmother, was it worth it?" Her granddaughter Sophie asked one afternoon. She was studying history in school and had learned about the Admiral, who had led humanity's return to power. Samantha considered the question carefully. The sun was warm on her face, and the flowers around her were bright with color. It was a peaceful scene, so different from the battle she had fought decades ago. "They left us no choice," she finally said. "When someone tries to destroy you, you have two options. You can accept your destruction, or you can fight back. We chose to fight, but did we have to be so harsh?" Samantha thought about the Threxan surrender, the destruction of the Confederacy fleets, the trials and reparations and long years of occupation. She thought about the children who had died from the plague, the colonists who had been slaughtered by raiders, the decades of contempt and exploitation. "We showed them exactly the same consideration they showed us," she said at last. "No more, no less. They begged for mercy when they were weak, just as we had begged when we were weak. And we answered them the same way they answered us." Sophie was quiet for a moment. "I am glad it is over." "So am I, child." "So am I." The old admiral looked up at the sky, where ships from 100 worlds moved among the stars. The galaxy had been remade by human hands. Peace had been achieved through human power. The species that had once dismissed humanity as primitive, savages now bowed to human authority. It was not the future Daniel Hayes had dreamed of when he first traveled to the stars. It was not the future Samantha had hoped for when she was a young officer watching her daughters die. But it was the future that the galaxy had created through its own cruelty and arrogance. The vote to exile Earth had passed 23 years after first contact, and humanity had shown no mercy. But perhaps, Samantha thought as she watched her grandchildren play in the garden, perhaps the next generation could build something better. Perhaps they could turn respect into trust and power into partnership. Perhaps the galaxy that had once rejected humanity could learn to accept them. That was a hope worth holding on to. Even now, the end.